Madam President, I rise today to thank my colleagues for their support earlier today of an amendment that I offered strengthening the protections for religious liberty in the ENDA legislation, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. This amendment was co-sponsored by Senators Ayotte, Heller, Hatch, and McCain, and I want to especially thank Senator Collins for the key role she played in its passage. Madam President, I firmly believe that no one should be subject to unjust discrimination. So I support the basic premise of ENDA, which is that people should be judged by their experience, their qualifications, and their job performance, not by their sexual orientation. Bottom line is people shouldn't be able to be fired just because they're gay. I believe the legislation currently before this body will help create that level playing field and ensure that employment opportunities are available to all. But it doesn't mean it's a perfect bill. It should be improved. And my amendment seeks to ensure that this legislation designed to promote tolerance of one kind doesn't enshrine intolerance of another kind. Religious liberty is an important part of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act already. The underlying bill includes a significant exemption for religious employers. But we've got to make certain that in pursuit of enforcing non-discrimination, those religious employers are not subject to a different kind of discrimination, and that would be government retaliation. My amendment seeks to ensure that the government cannot penalize a religious employer because it qualifies as exempt from the non-discrimination requirements of ENDA. It protects, for instance, a church or religious charity or religious school from adverse action by the government on the basis of adhering to its religious tenets in a manner that would otherwise be unlawful under ENDA. In practical terms, this means that the government can't use activities protected by ENDA's religious exemption as a basis to deny religious employers government grants, contracts, tax-exempt status, or other benefit. So my amendment prohibits the government from punishing a religious institution for adhering to its deeply held beliefs, and thereby seeks to keep the state from interfering in matters of faith. It does something else important, too. The underlying bill specifies several broad purposes related to addressing employment discrimination. My amendment adds to this introductory section an explicit reference to the fundamental right of religious freedom. It establishes as a basic purpose of ENDA that workplace fairness must be balanced against and made consistent with religious liberty. I believe the principles of religious liberty and non-discrimination go hand in hand. When we think about non-discrimination, many of us think of the great civil rights movements of the 20th century. But as we know, the fight for tolerance goes back further than that, really to the very foundation of our republic. On my mom's side, some of my ancestors were Quakers. They came to this country, like so many before them, in search of religious freedom. At first, that was something hard to find in this country. When they arrived, members of this new sect were often persecuted. Their views and practices were viewed to be unorthodox, even strange. Sometimes they were imprisoned. Their books were burned. Some of the colonies didn't want them inside their borders. They knew a little bit about religious freedom, and they certainly knew something about discrimination. And it was their experience, and the experience of so many other groups of different faiths, that made freedom of conscience a cornerstone of our founding documents. The First Amendment begins, and I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof," end quote. Religious freedom, therefore, is our first freedom, and the amendment that protects it really is our first non-discrimination law. Any law that we pass that seeks to prevent discrimination won't succeed if it doesn't, at the same time, protect religious liberty. The religious liberty protections in ENDA aren't perfect. My amendment makes them better, and that's why I appreciate my colleagues giving this amendment the support it deserves. Madam President, I'm looking forward to the passage of this legislation with this amendment. And again, I appreciate the work of the Senator from Maine and others on this. I yield back my time.
Madam President.